Yeah. Hello, my name is Ned Dennison. I'm the chairperson of the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. We have one of our honor swimmers with us today, Jaimie Monahan. Say hello, Jaimie.
Hey Ned, how's it going? Good morning and good evening.
Thank you. I want to give everybody just a very quick overview of Jaimie's career. She's known as the Queen of Around Manhattan. 27 times she's gone around the island, and she's done the first ever quadruple, which is 4 times, and she completed that in 2020. She also did some incredibly long lake swims. We're talking 69 kilometers in Geneva several times, in Lake Maggiore, 60 kilometers, and a new route in Lake George, 52 kilometers, Triple Crown swimmer, and she's also in the Ice Swimming Hall of Fame. So just a very brief overview of her swimming career. The reason for the interview today is Jaimie's one of the people who's traveled the world, and she's met a lot of people. And I asked her to indicate how many honorees that she'd actually met. And before we get to that, Jaimie, you're part of an exclusive group of open water swimmers, the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. Tell us a little bit about your feelings when you first found out, kind of continuing pride and your future goals in swimming.
Oh my goodness. So Ned, even before I got kind of the iconic Ned Dennison call out of the blue with the great news about the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, the first kind of surprise in that whole saga was that I was just absolutely flabbergasted to get an email from Nick Adams, who you know is just this legendary English channel swimmer. He was the president of the Channel Swimming and Piloting Federation at the time. And it was just like a quick note asking for my swim resume, saying he was going to nominate me for the Hall of Fame. And I was just kind of like starstruck to get an email from him, let alone kind of with that type of request. I just had no inkling before that this would even be possible for me at this point in my, swimming history. It was actually on the way back from Lake Maggiore swim in Italy, which was so beautiful, and kind of just dashed off a list of swims from the airport lounge and thought, goodness, this is such a long shot, but such an honor that anyone would even think of me for this. And then just kind of put it out of my head for a while. It was early evening, I remember, in the autumn, probably a month or two later, and I was actually at a work event when I got a call from a blocked number. I think a lot of people have these stories with you. And since I was at a work event, I thought it was a colleague or someone running late, and it was Ned Dennison, which was such an amazing surprise. I kind of stepped outside. I was like, wow, this is pretty crazy. And then you kind of delivered the news to me about the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame and inviting me to be in it. And I think I was even a little bit dizzy at that point. You were super professional and really kind on the call, but I think you also seemed a bit amused from your voice just at kind of my reaction and how just chuffed and shocked I was. So it's just such a fun story, and I'll always remember that each time I meet you. And now it's been several times around the world. We've met in different places, but I think that initial phone call, and I think every honoree from a certain vintage and to now has that experience. So that's just another thing that unites us. In terms of future goals, we corresponded a bit about this a couple of weeks ago. I really love your idea of the Marathon Centurion Club. That just seems like such a great way to kind of challenge yourself and keep going and stay motivated even after receiving such honors like being in the Hall of Fame. So that for me is going to be very inspirational. As you know, it's 100 marathon swims, 25 of them need to be above 25 kilometers. 50 need to be 16K or longer. And probably the hard part for me right now, having done so many Manhattan loops, is a minimum of 80 on different courses around the world. So I actually took the jump, made a tracker of what I've done so far, and I'm just about halfway there. So I think that's a good goal to kind of keep me motivated and inspired and encourage diversity of swims for a good long while. So that's kind of my next challenge I'm looking to take on.
So I'm at 55, but I have fewer years left than you do. So you have a longer runway. Jaimie,
You never know.
you had a fascinating kind of world tour a couple of years ago. I have this memory of you flying around the world and doing a marathon in every continent or something crazy like that. Tell us a little bit about that, and also tell us about a couple of the other great trips you've had.
Sure. Yeah. So I think I just love, for me, my passion is combining swimming and traveling. So kind of coming off the ice sevens, which was an ice mile on every continent. I was kind of swimming world. So I was actually working with the Guinness World Record um, Corporation and the World Open Water Swimming Association to set a record for and a new record for 6 marathon swims on 6 continents in 16 days. And that was just a great challenge logistically. We had so much fun, met lots of swimmers on the trip as well. And that's just great. But I think for me right now, one of the most fun excuses to travel, especially to a new place, is for the uh, IMSHOF inductions. So far, I've been to 2 in person. The first one in Windsor, outside of London, each here in Melbourne, Victoria, in Australia. And it's just such a great weekend because.
Sorry, Jaimie, we lost connection there for a minute. Can you go back
We
again?
did, yeah.
You had this idea of the 6 swims and 6 continents.
Oh, absolutely. Swimming and traveling, and coming off my personal challenge of the ice sevens, doing an ice mile on each continent. I started to pursue a new challenge of setting a Guinness World Record for being the first person to do 6 marathon swims on 6 continents. And the clincher with that was that was done in just 16 days. And it was great. It took me all around the world to some of the best marathon swim spots, I think, globally. And that was a great challenge. But I think the best excuse that I've had to travel for swimming is for the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame inductions. So far, I've been to 2 in person, one in Windsor outside of London, which was just hosted in this beautiful castle, and one in the beach in Melbourne in Australia. And just both were such great weekends because they include social events. They have the induction to welcome all of the new honorees, and they usually include even a social swim or two over the weekend. So those are always a great time and a great opportunity to combine traveling with swimming and meeting fellow swimmers.
So it's interesting. Famous swimmer Lynn Cox had a world tour 20, 30 years ago, whatever it was. And so you kind of took that to a new level at a new time. Um, you have physically met 66 living honorees out of 172 of these honorees. Incredibly, 38%. And I'm curious, did it just happen? Did you, for example, on your world tour, did you reach out to people and say, look, I'm going to be in town. Can we have a cup of coffee? Give us a tour of some of these people you met. You talked about Nick Adams, one of our favorite people. Did you meet the fastest, longest, most accomplished, biggest contributors? Who were the rogues? The most unusual stories?
Yeah. And for me, I really thought about this question a lot because obviously with the list of honorees, there's so many amazing people, and it's really hard to define the fastest, the most inspirational. Definitely some good stories in there. I love the diversity of the honorees that I've met, everything from kind of the really old-timey swimmers from different eras, which is amazing. I really enjoy meeting the professional swimmers, the epic racers, because what they do is just so different to what I've experienced kind of in marathon swimming. So it's always just an honor to meet those folks. But Um, and yeah, it's actually funny because sometimes it does just sort of happen, because as you know, it's a very small world, especially in the swim community. I probably should be better about reaching out when I am in town, but I've been really fortunate to kind of, ad hoc just meet folks. So most were at some sort of organized swim event or swim related gathering, like the Wowza Awards, or different conferences. But there's definitely been a few surprises. For example, I ran into on the street in New York City the amazing endurance swimmer, Big River Man Martin Strel, just on the street. He gave me a hug. It was, just such a wonderful random swimming New York City moment. Some other funny memories that stand out, and it's hard to name these because I think I consider so many people on that list like friends and my heroes, so they're all at different levels. But some really key memories that stand out is when I saw Colleen Blair was being inducted this year. I immediately flashed back. We did a relay together at another honoree Colin Hill's chill swim event a couple of years ago. We were dressing up in full green face paint and costumes to do a relay swim as the Grinch that stole Christmas. So it's those funny, quirky moments that come to me, as well as everybody's amazing accomplishments. And one great thing with marathon swimming and also being involved with ice swimming is a lot of marathon swimmers have started to dabble or kind of take a second swimming life in ice swimming. So, for example, I was again probably very starstruck just randomly on the bus back from the hotel at an ice swimming competition, was Irene Vanderlaan, who is just one of my heroes, and I had never met or corresponded with her before. But she's just so inspirational for me because she basically has done a marathon swim, including professional marathon racing, every year, pretty much from 1978 to 2019 when she segued into ice swimming. So I think she was kind of caught off guard. We were all kind of in our bubble on the public transport bus, but that was one of my favorite moments of just like synchronicity and just the swimming bringing us together. So
I ran into Shelley Taylor Smith the first time coming out of a hotel in a small town south of Perth, and I just said like Shelley Taylor Smith, and I said hello. She kind of sort of knew my name, and I said like 3 days ago I watched the video of you winning the Manhattan race of whatever year it was, and she kind of completely blushed, and she had a business thing to go to. But Martin Strel is one of those guys that I think if you actually spent any time with him, you'd have more stories than you could ever tell. You had have been in a fight, you'd have been in jail for the night, you'd have had experiences you could never tell anybody about. Definitely a wild character, Martin. And so it's a balance of all sorts of people. Tell us about your marathon swim that you're the most proud of, and maybe what was the toughest.
sure, and it's probably right now, I think it always varies day to day, but right now I think they're actually the same swim. I think I'm always going to have this thrill of pride just remembering the summer of 2020, which, is memorable for a lot of different reasons. But for me, swimming wise, myself and my team were able to complete in the midst of the pandemic, actually 18 loops around Manhattan Island, including 7 swims in 7 days. This is a 45-kilometer swim. It's not a super easy one, no matter what people think. And then kind of the culmination of that season was the world's first quadruple Manhattan circumnavigation. So, obviously that was a massive challenge logistically, just due to the distance, which was 183 kilometers. And, it took 45 hours, but it was especially memorable, challenging, and, meaningful just because of the times that we were doing it in. And it's probably a unique situation to not see that much traffic on the New York waterways at that time. So So, but the reason why I'm super proud of myself and my team for those accomplishments is just because we had adversity on pretty much every dimension, but we were not only able to get through it, but we were able to achieve something, incredibly meaningful and totally unprecedented, which, was super exciting for me. And I think I'll always remember that swim as a big one.
You have been in the background or the foreground for the Ice Swimming Hall of Fame for the past few years. I think you personally set up the website with your own hands, and you kind of make sure this thing moves along. I have in the Marathon Hall of Fame the luxury of probably a much more active committee around me. But I'd be curious your impressions of the differences between the halls. The ice swim is obviously very, very young and all those kinds of things, but just your experience now of kind of running something like that and how they're different. And nothing's ever better or worse, so they're just different.
Yeah, for sure. So I think, as you know, and you were very involved from the inception, so thank you. The Ice Swimming Hall of Fame was established to recognize and to honor leading ice swimmers, winter swimmers, and also all the contributors to the sport of cold water swimming. So it is a small but mighty committee right now. John T. Warnikin, who's on the team G, he's also known as the Para King of the Ice, is my co-administrator. And it's just definitely been such a pleasure working with him over the past few years, as I know as well. You worked with him to set it up initially. So yeah, in terms of numbers, we currently have 18 individual honorees, pretty modest compared to IMSHOF's 321, I think, nominees, but we've been around just under 5 years now, and you guys have had the luxury of 60 years. But I do think our process is sensible and selective, given that it's a relatively new competitive sport, and just the youth of the organization overall. And looking back on the different classes historically, our numbers in our first 3 classes are actually almost identical to the International Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame. So we've got 18 as opposed to 19 in your first 3 classes. But it is a super impressive and super international group. Right now, we have honorees. Those 18 come from 12 different countries, and we live and work across 6 of 7 continents. Of course, the 7th is Antarctica, and 8 of our honorees have done some sort of swim there, but we've yet to have anyone settle there for a good stretch. But I imagine sometime in the future that may happen as well. So yeah, within this group, there's 60 certified ice miles, including 13 ice 0 miles and 6 polar ice miles. But interestingly, again, this is a diverse group. So around a third of the current honorees have never completed an ice mile. And that includes both our honors swimmers and the contributors. And the group, like IMSHOF, is also diverse in terms of the contributors, coaches, and then for swimmers, we kind of have both the adventure swimmers and the very serious competitive racers, including at least 1 Olympian. We have world champions, record holders, so it's a really impressive group. And I do imagine, as with the growing popularity of the sport, it's going to be even more competitive in the future years as, the sport and the organizations grow. Yeah, and as you mentioned, in terms of process, it operates a bit differently than IMSHOF or really any other sports hall of fame. We did a lot of benchmarking to see how other halls operate. Obviously, took a lot of learnings from the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame, but also researched other sports to see what we could take from their process and membership committee. But our process is very intentionally inclusive. Anyone can nominate any cold water swimmer or contributor, and our only guideline is that nominees should have a body of work of at least 5 years. Obviously, that might change in the future as the sport advances and matures. But and like IMSHOF, there's no requirement that nominees need to be retired necessarily, which I think is great and very unique to swimming, because swimming is a sport you can do your whole life. And I hope that all of our honorees, and yours as well, will continue to swim all their lives. You said how much time you have left, and we never know, so we should always take advantage of it. Um, yeah, and we do a short standardized form, try to make the process pretty painless. And we do fact check all of the submissions, and then present them to our individual honorees who are our voting committee. All 18 of our voters, our honorees, will vote. And that's because we really rely on them as being some of the foremost experts in cold water swimming. They're knowledgeable about the people involved, their accomplishments. So we really rely on their judgment, and that is up to them entirely. So, and the important part of our process is that we respect their collective decision. And yeah, another unique thing about Ice Swimming Hall of Fame is that our induction, unlike IMSHOF, we don't have a certain central induction ceremony right now, but this is intentionally inclusive as well, just because we're not affiliated with any particular organization. We don't require our honorees to go to any particular event to get inducted. We kind of meet them where they are. We're really fortunate to have kind of collectives of, or kind of groupings of honorees at certain competitions like the World Championships for winter swimming and ice swimming. But other than that, if people can't make it, we'll have them have a presentation locally, or at another event of their choice. So again, in these times, it makes sense to kind of be more open-ended there. So yeah, and we really are focused on celebrating them in the way that they prefer. Yeah, and again, the Hall of Fame, as is the sport, is really kind of young in the early stages. But just in the past year, after COVID, we've really upped our game in terms of social media, the physical awards given out, plans for new initiatives, including expanding our committee, including a diversity and equity and inclusion committee, some merchandising, and more in the future. So I think there's a lot ahead for the Hall of Fame, as there is for ice and winter swimming in general. So I'm really excited about the future for that.
There's one challenge which I think you're probably already seeing. In marathon swimming in the 1960s, you may well have gotten in the Hall of Fame because you did three big swims over a 2-year period. In the 1930s, you didn't fly around the world to do swims. You took ocean liners. And all of these swims that we talk about today, they didn't exist. There were no federations, there were no associations besides, the CSA, for example, and a couple of very early federations. So it's sometimes difficult when somebody says to me, yeah, but so-and-so in 1967, I have a better resume than they have. And I go, yeah, that's okay. But at the time, there were 2 Triple Crowners. There's now 200. So, Jaimie Monahan, the first Ice 7 swimmer in the world, I think I'm correct on that. In 10 years' time, there may be 50 of you. So doing an Ice 7s isn't going to have the same appeal, it's the same cachet that it did just a couple of years ago. So that's interesting, that as the sports get bigger and more successful, it gets harder and harder and harder to get in.
Yeah, I mean, I hope that's the case. I would love to have a cohort of 20 Ice 7 swimmers. That would be amazing. I think, and I hope, all the selectors and all the halls of fames kind of keep in mind kind of the historical context, right? It's quite different if somebody's been to 4 continents swimming in a certain time frame, than in modern times, right? I think some of my personal challenges are kind of demonstrate how easy it is for us to move around the world and connect at these times. And that was so different, when the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame was established. So yeah, I think it's always the context of the person. And again, I love some of my favorites that I'll probably never, well, that I won't ever meet are kind of the historical swimmers that the Marathon Swimming Hall of Fame focuses on inducting and making sure they're accomplished. Nat, I think I lost you.
I'm back with you. Apologies everyone for the recording. Apologies everyone, the recording popped in and out. We will say thank you to Jaimie, and we'll post this shortly.